On that sultry Saturday morning, the distant sound of engines and horns echoed through the narrow streets of Itaporanga, a small town full of vanity and pretense. The sun reflected brightly in the windows of the main avenue, where new cars gleamed like trophies of status. It was there, amid the hustle and bustle of vendors and the smell of fresh coffee from a nearby bakery, that he entered. Mr. David Araujo, a man with dark skin, a serene gaze, and hands marked by time. He wore a simple, clean and pressed dress shirt, light denim pants, and a straw hat that gave him an air of ancient dignity. To outsiders, he seemed just another ordinary man. But no one there imagined that this gentleman owned one of the largest agricultural cooperatives in the northern part of the state, responsible for employing dozens of families in the region. Mr. Davy wasn't looking for luxury, he was just looking for respect. He woke up early, determined to buy a tractor new to the farm. A powerful, modern tractor that would help increase production and make life easier for the workers. However, what he would find at that dealership wasn't just an arrogant salesman, but a lesson in the power of prejudice and the silent strength of dignity. The way others would judge him, treat him with disdain, and try to measure his worth by the color of his skin and the simplicity of his clothing. It would be the beginning of a story that would leave an entire town silent. Before we dive into this surprising plot, tell me which city and state you are watching us from. Leave a comment, and I will respond in gratitude. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and like this video. We want to share more stories like this. Judgment by the look. The square clock read 8:40 in the morning when Seu Davi crossed the cobblestone street with firm, calm steps. The rhythmic tapping of his cane contrasted with the sound of motorcycles and cars rushing past. On his head was the straw hat he always wore to protect himself from the sun, a simple symbol of a lifetime of honest work. The city of Itaporanga that day seemed to wake up feeling vain, mirrored glass storefronts, gleaming dealerships, and well-dressed people parading with an air of importance. Seu Davi observed everything calmly, like someone who has seen the world turn many times and learned that appearance is only a passing disguise. As he approached the large dealership, he noticed the gleam of the new pickup trucks displayed in the direct sunlight. The cars looked like jewels on wheels, each with a price any simple man would consider unthinkable. But for him, this wasn't ostentation, it was an investment. He needed a new tractor and perhaps a pickup truck for transporting the crops, machines that would make a difference to the cooperative, which grew with each harvest. The window reflected his image, and for an instant, he noticed the contrast. The black man in simple clothes, standing before a sea of shine, glass, and metal. He took a deep breath and walked inside. The cool air conditioning enveloped him, and the soft ambient sound of international music gave the space an almost artificial feel. At the counter, 3 salespeople chatted animatedly, laughing among themselves. Upon noticing Mr. Davy's presence, the laughter subsided, but the stares remained. One of them, in a navy blue suit and a practiced smile, walked toward him with slow steps and an expression that blended forced politeness with distrust. "Of course, sir," said the salesman, with the tone of someone asking without real interest. "Good morning, my son. I'm looking for a farm tractor, a sturdy model with 4-wheel drive. I'm told they have one here." The salesman raised an eyebrow, crossed his arms, and replied, "Tractor? We work with premium tractors here, sir. You can find more affordable tractors a couple of blocks down at Agromachinas." Mr. Davi kept his gaze steady, unshaken. "I know what I want. I heard about this model here." He calmly pointed to a modern machine in the background, imposing with green paint and wide wheels. "I wanted to see if I could take a closer look at it, maybe give it a test drive." The salesman gave a short, muffled chuckle. Test? He repeated, almost mockingly. Sir, these tractors cost over 800,000 rees. Do you understand what that means? Yes, I understand. That's why I came here to negotiate. The simple man's words seemed to fall flat in that atmosphere. The salesman glanced at his colleagues in the background, who were already watching the scene, suppressing their laughter. He turned to Mr. Davi with a wry smile. Okay, sir, he said, picking up a tablet. But before anything, I need to register. Documents, proof of income, something to prove my intention to purchase. You know how it is, right? Company policies. I have the money, Mr. Davi replied, without getting excited. I just want to see the tractor working. The salesman sighed. Look, Mr. Davy, I don't want to sound rude, but we usually only allow test drives for customers who already have a purchase history or credit approval. The silence that followed was heavy. The cold air in the store seemed to freeze time. Mr. Davy stood still for a few seconds, looking into the salesman's eyes, and then replied in a calm but firm voice, So, because I didn't come in a suit, you think I can't pay? The salesman hesitated, shook his head, trying to compose himself. It's not that. It's just standard procedure. Standard for whom? Interrupted Mr. Davi, without raising his voice. For those with lighter skin? For those who speak differently? An awkward silence fell over the place. One of the vendors in the back coughed, hiding his discomfort. The first, already impatient, tried to end the conversation. Sir, it's not a matter of color or clothing. It's just that this equipment isn't for everyone. That sentence cut through the air like a blade. It's not for everyone. Davi heard the words echo inside, not as a new insult, but as an old ghost he already knew by heart. Since he was a boy, he'd grown up hearing people doubt him. When he founded the cooperative, they said it wouldn't last 6 months. When he bought his first farm, they mocked him, thinking he was just an employee signing papers for others. And now, decades later, he still had to prove he could pay whatever he wanted. He took a deep breath, slowly ran his hand over his hat, and replied calmly, All right, sir. Thanks for your time. I won't take any more of yours. He turned and began walking toward the door, while the vendor let out a sigh of relief, as if rid of a nuisance. As he crossed the street, the traffic seemed louder, as if the world were shouting something he couldn't respond to out loud. Across the avenue, a small shop caught the eye. Its facade was simple, with no mirrored glass or English slogans. Just a metal sign with hand-painted letters. Santo Antonio Agricultural Machinery. Here the countryside is respected. Davi smiled slightly and went inside. Inside, the floor was beaten cement, and the smell of diesel fuel mingled with that of fresh coffee. A young white woman in a modest uniform and a sincere smile approached. Good morning, sir. May I help you? Yes, you can, my dear. I'm looking for a tractor for my farm. A good, strong one that can handle heavy work. She nodded, picked up a catalogue, and replied sympathetically. We have a new model that arrived this week. If you'd like, I can show you how it works in the yard. It would be amazing. A short while later, he was outside, behind the wheel of the tractor, the engine purring loudly under the hood. The smile on his face was subtle but genuine. The employee, noticing the gleam in his eyes, commented, You understand machines, huh? Yes, I understand, my daughter. I've been working with this for 40 years. When he parked back, he calmly got out, ran his hand over the hood and said, I'll take this one. And 2 more small trucks for delivering the crops. The young woman's eyes widened. 3, and all in sight. She laughed, half in disbelief. Really, sir? Seriously, I came here to buy just one, but after what I went through out front, I decided the money will stay here, where respect is worth more than the price. As he signed the papers, Mr. Davy looked looked out the window and saw the reflection of the luxury dealership across the street. A group of salespeople watched the machines being turned on in the courtyard of the simple store. One of them was the same one who, minutes earlier, had laughed at his presence. Now his smile faded. At that moment, the roar of the engines sounded like music. It wasn't just the sound of new machines, it was the sound of dignity being heard, of respect being bought back with silence and work. Mr. Davi adjusted his hat, thanked the saleswoman, and before leaving simply said, "It's not money that makes a man great, it's how he treats others when he has the power to choose." And then he left, with the same calm step of someone who knows that life always demands, sooner or later, the price of arrogance. The echo of respect. News of the black man who bought 3 pieces of agricultural machinery outright from a modest store spread quickly through the city of Itaporanga. Within hours, it was the talk of the cafes, newsstands, and even the lunch tables of merchants. Some spoke with admiration, others with curiosity, and still others feigned indifference, barely able to hide their discomfort. At the luxurious dealership, the atmosphere grew tense. The manager, a middle-aged man with a rigid posture and a stern look, paced back and forth inside the glass-enclosed office, reviewing the security cameras. He stopped in front of the monitor when he saw the moment. Seu Davi was mistreated. He crossed his arms, took a deep breath, and said quietly, "It was him, the customer Rogério served." Rogério, the salesman in the navy blue suit, sat in the corner of the room, fidgeting, trying to hide his nervousness. He felt the weight of the mistake becoming real, more than a simple misunderstanding. He clearly remembered Seu Davi's serene face, the polite way he had responded, and now, seeing the images of the man crossing the street and being greeted with a smile in another store, he felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't just regret, it was shame. A shame that stemmed not only from the professional error, but from what he had become. Someone who judged people by their appearance, like so many others he had once criticized. On the other side of town, Seu Davi was returning home with the serenity of someone who knew that respect is silent, but makes noise when necessary. The cooperative's driver was waiting for him on the corner with the old car he always used for travel. In the backseat was a wooden box bearing the logo of his company, Cooperativa Raízes do Vale, which he had founded 30 years earlier. Inside were documents, contracts, and expansion plans, paperwork that proved how much this man, underestimated by so many, was a giant who walked with simplicity. During the drive, he remained silent for long minutes, gazing out the window at the landscape. Corn and soybean fields stretched to the horizon, and the warm wind blew against the glass. The driver, a young man named Tiago, who respected him like a father, noticed his boss's thoughtful expression and broke the silence. "Did something happen in town, Mr. Davi?" He smiled slightly, without taking his eyes off the road. "It did happen, James, but nothing a calm heart can't solve." "Was it a business thing?" "Of people," he replied, pausing before adding, "people who still think color defines character." Tiago sighed, knowing that kind of thing was still common, even today. But the way his boss spoke was different. There was no anger, just a calm firmness, the kind of strength that comes from someone who has learned to overcome prejudice without having to shout. Upon arriving at the farm, the workers approached, curious. When they saw the new machines arriving on the transport truck, everyone's eyes lit up. They were powerful, modern tractors with engines that purred with pride. "Look at this, Mr. Davi," shouted one of the workers, grinning like a child with a new toy. He simply smiled, nodded, and replied, "This is yours too. We grow together." That simple gesture filled the air with joy. It wasn't just a purchase, it was a symbol. A black man, from humble beginnings, now commanding an empire of land and harvest, proving that a human being's worth is never measured by their clothes, but by their work and the way they treat those they walk alongside. Meanwhile, back at the dealership, the manager called Rogerio for a serious conversation. "You know what you did, don't you?" he asked, keeping his tone cool and controlled. Rogerio swallowed hard. I didn't mean to offend the man. I was just following protocol." "Protocol?" the manager repeated, slamming his hand on the table. "Protocol is respecting the customer, not humiliating anyone who comes in here." Silence fell. Rogerio lowered his head without answering. The manager continued. "The gentleman you mistreated bought 3 tractors and 2 trucks cash from the store next door. It was news all over town. You just handed the sale of your career into someone else's hands." The words fell heavy as lead. Rogerio tried to justify himself, but the manager interrupted him. "You'll hand in your resignation letter today, and I hope this teaches you something about humility, because there's no room here for those who think they're better than others." Rogerio left the room silently, his face pale. For the first time, he didn't feel indignant or revolted. He felt small. The arrogance that had haunted him every day seemed to have evaporated, leaving only the bitter taste of defeat. In the following days, something curious happened. The little shop where Seu Davi had bought the tractors began receiving more customers than ever. Farmers from other towns, touched by the story that was spreading like wildfire, began to prefer that humble place to the luxurious dealership. They said the service there was different, human, respectful, genuine. Mr. Davy, for his part, continued his routine without fanfare. He didn't seek applause or headlines. What drove him was the same as always, the desire to see his people grow with dignity. But one afternoon, sitting on the porch of the farm's main house, he received an unexpected visitor. It was the very manager of the dealership who had mistreated him. He arrived in a black car, parked silently, and hat in hand, got out with an embarrassed expression. "Mr. Davy, I'm sorry to show up like this, unannounced," he began. "I needed to apologize on behalf of the company." David looked at him for a few seconds and calmly replied, "Forgiveness does not return what was said, but it shows that there is still awareness." The man nodded, not daring to look up. "The guy was fired, and I came to say that if you ever want to do business with us again, the door is open." David smiled, not with irony, but with understanding. "Don't worry, I've already found the right place to buy. Not out of revenge, but because where there is respect, money returns happily. Where there is contempt, it never returns." The manager took a deep breath, shook his head and said, "You're right, and I sincerely hope that one day I'll have the chance to learn from men like you." Watching him walk away, David fell silent for a moment, gazing out at the golden sunset horizon. The wind blew lightly, carrying the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of new machinery working the fields. It was a sound of new beginnings, not just for him, but for all who heard that story and understood that respect, when it blossoms, sows seeds that time never erases. As the sun slowly set, tinting the sky with shades of orange and gold, Seu Davi thought to himself, "Dignity is like a harvest. It takes time to grow, it requires patience, but when it arrives, it nourishes more than any fortune." And he smiled, because he knew that true power lay not in buying, but in teaching, without having to raise one's voice. Top of the form, bottom of the form. The weight of silence and the value of dignity. The following days in Itaporanga were marked by a different atmosphere. It was as if the city, accustomed to judging people by appearance and surname, was swallowing a bitter and at the same time necessary lesson. Seu Davi's story had crossed invisible borders, passing from mouth to mouth with the ease of someone recounting a momentous event, one that no one forgets. "Did you hear about the black farmer who bought 3 tractors outright?" they would say in conversation. "Well, that quiet man taught a lesson to a bunch of uppity people. Even those who had previously looked down on him now tried to disguise their embarrassment with exaggerated praise. as if belated admiration erased the prejudice they harbored. But Seu Davi didn't thrive on applause. He continued his routine as if nothing had happened. He woke early, drank coffee brewed on the wood-burning stove, checked on the cooperative members' work, and in the late afternoon sat on the porch to watch the sun set over the crops. What had changed wasn't his life, but the awareness of others. The respect he had previously been denied now came with softer looks, firmer handshakes, and less arrogant voices. Even so, he knew that prejudice isn't erased with a gesture, but with time and with example. One Tuesday afternoon, as he watched the workers adjusting the new machinery, a car pulled up in front of the farm. It was a dark, gleaming pickup truck, and out stepped a young man in a tie, clearly out of place in that dusty, earthy environment. He walked up to Mr. Davy with a slight embarrassed smile. "Are you the owner of the Raízes de Vale cooperative?" he asked. "Yes, I am, my son. How can I help?" The boy took a deep breath before answering. "My name is Rogerio. I think you remember me." David looked closely. That face was familiar. The same fair skin tone, the same gelled hair, the same haughty expression, only now there was something different. Regret. "Yes, I remember," he replied calmly. "The boy in the blue suit." Rogerio lowered his eyes. "I came to apologize, Mr. Davi. I shouldn't have spoken like that. I was arrogant, prejudiced, and you didn't deserve that." The silence that followed was long. The wind blew gently, raising small clouds of dust around the two men's feet. David stood still, watching the boy before him, not with anger, but with something deeper, compassion. "You know, Rogerio," he began, "when I was a boy, my father used to say that words carry weight, that sometimes what we say carelessly, the other person carries with them for the rest of their lives." Rogerio swallowed hard, unable to respond. "But he also said," Davi continued, "that forgiveness is the only way for us to break this burden. If you truly came here not to clear your conscience but to learn, then you are forgiven." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "I came to learn, Mr. Davy. I lost my job. I lost people's trust. But I learned a lesson I needed." David nodded slowly. "Sometimes we need to fall to see the ground we're standing on." Rogerio moved, asked, "May I visit your cooperative? I'd like to see what you've built." "Of course you do, my son. The gate here has never closed to those who come with an open heart." The two walked side by side through the farm's corridors. Rogerio observed everything in amazement. The full warehouses, the new tractors working, the cooperative members smiling and greeting one another like one big family. "It all started small," Davy explained, "a single seed. When I founded the cooperative, people said it was crazy, that poor and black people didn't know how to manage. But I persisted, and not out of anger, but with purpose. I wanted to prove that dignity and work go hand in hand." Rogerio listened in silence, each word like a punch to his conscience. He remembered how many times he'd laughed at humble people who came into the store just to ask prices, how he'd thought success came from the shine on their shoes, not the sweat on their brow. Now, standing before this humble man, he felt the weight of having wasted years believing lies. When they returned to the porch, David offered him coffee. The young man accepted, sitting down with his hands still shaking. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "You could have humiliated me. You could have turned your back on me. But you chose to teach me." David smiled. "Teaching is better than humiliating. Those who humiliate lose respect. Those who teach plant the future." That sentence would remain etched in Rogerio's mind for a long time. Before saying goodbye, he took a folded sheet of paper from his pocket, a handwritten letter. "I wrote this for you," he said, handing the paper over. "It's a public apology. I want the city to know what I've learned." David took the letter and replied, "Leave it to me. But know that true repentance doesn't need an audience. It needs action. Rogerio nodded, shook the farmer's hand, and left. Watching him leave, Davi took a deep breath, feeling a new peace. It was as if, in that moment, the cycle had closed. There was no more anger, no more resentment, only the certainty that respect, when born from a sincere heart, transforms even the most hardened of men. The following week, during the cooperative's monthly meeting, Davi recounted what had happened, not as a story of revenge, but as an example of transformation. "We don't change the world by yelling at it," he told the members. "We change by being the example the world needs to see." The workers listened in silence, moved. Many of them knew what it was like to be looked down upon, judged by their skin color or accent. Those words resonated deeply, awakening something no political speech could generate: hope. Months passed. Rogerio, now unemployed, began working in a small agricultural workshop. There, he met humble people, learned to value each customer, and, little by little, rebuilt his image. Every now and then he would pass by the road and see the tractors of the Cooperativa Raízes do Vale crossing his path, kicking up dust and pride. He smiled to himself, remembering the man who gave him back more than his job could have given him: dignity. One day, a regional newspaper published a story. Prejudiced former salesman redeems himself and opens a company focused on humanized service. The article recounted Rogerio's journey and cited the inspiration that led him to change. In the end, one sentence of his summed it all up. "A black man taught me what greatness is without having to raise his voice. Since then, I've never looked down on anyone." When Mr. Davi read that article, he was back on the porch, drinking his coffee. He smiled, looked at the horizon, and said in a low voice, almost like a prayer, "That's what the world needs. Less judgment, more humanity." The wind blew lightly, making his hat swing on his head. The new machines worked in the distance, and the rhythmic sound of the engines mingled with the birdsong. It was the sound of life moving forward in peace, the sound of a story that began with pain but ended with learning. Because in the end, true power isn't about having, it's about inspiring. And Seu Davi, with his calm and unwavering faith, had done just that, transforming prejudice into respect and silence into a voice for all who were once judged by the color of their skin, but never by the greatness of their heart. The legacy of respect. Time passed, and Seu Davi's story went from being just a town rumor to a living inspiration. The Raízes do Vale cooperative grew impressively, not only in numbers, but in purpose. Farmers from neighboring municipalities began seeking guidance, wanting to understand how this simple man, with his calm speech and unwavering faith, had built something so solid in a world still rife with inequality and distrust. Davi, always serene, said that the secret lay not in the strength of his arm, nor in the money he had saved in the bank, but in the respect he cultivated like someone planting seeds in fertile soil. "What grows from a righteous heart flourishes in any land," he would repeat, and this phrase began to be painted on the cooperative's walls as a daily reminder of what truly mattered. In Itaporanga, the changes were visible. Prejudice, which had previously hidden behind fake smiles and sidelong glances, was beginning to fade. Not because people were afraid of making another mistake, but because Seu Davi's example had shown that treating others with dignity brings prosperity. The simple shop where he had bought the machines had become a landmark throughout the region. The saleswoman, Clara, was now known in several cities. People came from far and wide just to be served by her, knowing that she wasn't just selling equipment, but offering respect and humanity. Two rare things in times when money seemed to be worth more than character. Clara, grateful for Seu Davi's gesture, had become the store's manager. One afternoon, she received an unexpected call. A large company wanted to partner with his cooperative, and the condition was that she would broker the sale. Respect breeds respect, she thought, moved. That same day, she decided to visit the farm to thank him in person. When she arrived, she found Seu Davi sitting in the shade of a mango tree, watching the workers return from the fields. The image was poetic. The man who had once been judged by his skin color was now a symbol of prosperity and unity. Clara approached with a sincere smile. "Mr. Davi, you can't imagine how much your attitude changed my life." He smiled, adjusting his straw hat. "It changed yours and many others, my daughter, but not because I did something great, but because you saw the value of simplicity." She sat beside him, and for a moment they sat in silence, listening to the wind rustling the leaves. Clara then told him about the call, their new partnership, and how his story was inspiring people throughout the region. Davi listened patiently, and when she finished, he replied with the same calmness as always. "Respect is like the corn we plant. It takes time, it needs care, sun and rain. But when it grows, it feeds everyone around." As they talked, a group of children ran down the dirt road, playing push-along wooden carts. One of them, a dark-skinned boy with a wide smile, stopped when he saw the tractor passing by and shouted, "One day I'll drive one of those too." David smiled, waved, and replied loudly, "And yes, you will, my son. You will go further than I did." Clara watched the scene and felt her eyes well up. True wealth lay there, not in the tractors, the land, or the crops, but in the hope that one man's example could plant in the hearts of future generations. Later, as the sun set behind the hills, Davy walked to the cooperative's small warehouse where the workers gathered every Friday to pray and give thanks for the week. He climbed onto a makeshift crate that served as a pulpit and looked out at the attentive faces. "My friends," he began, his voice firm, "we live in a world where many people still believe that skin color defines a man's worth. But I tell you, value lies in character, in words, and in the way we treat others." The words came out with force and calm, echoing in the respectful silence. One day, they looked me up and down and thought I couldn't afford a tractor. Today, not only did I buy one, I saw that same salesman come back here to apologize. And you know what I learned from that? That prejudice isn't overcome with anger, but with action. And the most powerful attitude is to keep your head held high without losing faith or kindness. The workers applauded, some with tears in their eyes. It was more than a speech, it was a testament to life. That night, many returned home changed, carrying the certainty that respect begins with the gaze, and that humility is the greatest form of greatness there is. A few months later, a group of journalists showed up at the farm. They wanted to record a report on the story that had gone viral on social media. Davi agreed, but on one condition: that they not call him a hero. A hero is someone who wakes up early and does the right thing even when no one is looking, he said, smiling. The interview was broadcast nationally, and the phrase spread like a breath of fresh air. The next day, messages began arriving from all over the country. Simple people, wealthy people, young people, old people, all touched by the story of a man who taught him what dignity means. And among the messages, there was one that made him smile even more. It was from Rogerio. "Mr. Davi, I watched the interview. Today I own a small shop. On the sign at the entrance, I had it written, 'Here, respect comes before the sale.' I learned from you. Thank you." David was silent for a few seconds, overcome with emotion. He carefully folded the letter and put it in his shirt pocket. Then he stood up, looked out over the golden countryside at dusk, and murmured, "That's how you plant the future, one gesture at a time." The wind blew gently, stirring up dust from the road, while the sound of tractors echoed in the distance. It was the echo of respect, the invisible sound of justice that needs no applause to be grand. Mr. Davi, with his hat on his head and his soul at peace, walked back home. And on that walk, his every step seemed to tell the world, skin color may be the target of prejudice, but the glow of dignity, that no one can dim. Recognition and eternity. Time passed with the same serenity with which the wind blows through the fields. Seu Davi's story was no longer just a memory. It was a living example, passed down from generation to generation, like a seed of wisdom that never ceased to blossom. The new generations of the Raízes do Vale cooperative grew up hearing about the man in the straw hat who taught Itaporanga that respect is more valuable than gold. And even those who never met him personally felt as if they had seen him one day. Walking the dirt roads, greeting each worker with the same firm handshake and the same kind gaze he always carried. The farm was thriving. The crops stretched as far as the eye could see, the silos were full, and families who had previously struggled to survive now lived with dignity. But what was most striking was the atmosphere among the people. There was no boss and employee. There was partnership. Davi had transformed that place into a symbol of unity and equality. It was common to see him sharing lunch with the workers, listening to each one's stories, smiling patiently and humbly. And every time someone called him doctor or boss, he would respond with a laugh. "The sun is the boss, my daughter. He's the one who tells us to get up early every day. I'm just another worker who isn't too lazy to dream." But like every life marked by grand gestures, Seu Davi's was also beginning to approach its sunset. He no longer walked as nimbly, and the straw hat that once protected him from the sun now served as a shadow for his memory, guarding memories that time would never erase. The wrinkles on his face told silent stories of struggle, faith, and overcoming. Yet the sparkle in his eyes remained the same, serene, firm, and full of peace. One Sunday morning, Clara appeared at the farm with an invitation in hand. "Mr. Davi," she said emotionally, "the city wants to honor you. There's going to be an event in the municipal auditorium. They want to give you the title of Honorary Citizen of Itaporanga." David smiled slightly, almost embarrassed. "Tribute to me? Oh, my daughter, what I did was just what anyone should do, treat others like people." "But that's precisely why," she replied, "because you showed the whole city what it means to be a real person." Days later, the auditorium was packed. Men and women, young and old, all wanted to see the man who had changed the course of the city. On the stage, a panel with gold letters read, "Respect is the soil in which humanity flourishes." And right below, his name, Davi Araujo, Roots of the Valley Cooperative. When Davi entered, hat in hand and walking slowly, the audience rose to their feet. The applause was so long that the sound echoed like a thunderclap of gratitude. He looked out at the crowd with teary eyes. Among the faces, he saw Clara smiling, Tiago, the driver who had accompanied him for so many years, black and white children sitting side by side, and even Rogerio, the former salesman, now with a serene and mature expression. The event's host invited him to the microphone. Davy took a deep breath and began speaking in a slow but firm voice. "I don't know if I deserve all the beautiful things they say out there. I just lived the way my father taught me, without letting anger harden me and without allowing prejudice to turn me into a mirror of what hurt me." The audience fell silent, hanging on every word. Many people think power lies in money, but true power lies in looking at others and seeing them as equals. Skin color, clothing, the way they speak. None of these things measure character. What does measure it is respect. He paused for a moment, took a deep breath and added with a slight smile, "If you ever have doubts about how to treat someone, treat them the way you would want your father to be treated. The world would be a better place if we used our hearts more and judgment less." The audience rose to their feet in applause, some in tears, others simply clapping with their eyes closed. It was more than a tribute. It was a moment of collective redemption. There, amidst that applause, the city's prejudiced past seemed to finally be laid to rest. In the months that followed, Seu Davi's story continued to spread. Schools began teaching about him in local citizenship projects, and a square was named after him. At the entrance to the cooperative, a bronze plaque was placed with the phrase he often said, "Respect is the greatest profit there is." But the greatest tribute wasn't in monuments. It was in people's attitudes. Residents began greeting each other more, helping each other. Prejudice still existed, but now it encountered resistance. And this resistance had a name, a face, and a story. A few years later, when Davi passed away, the city came to a standstill. The procession moved slowly through the streets, accompanied by hundreds of people. Farm workers, business owners, children, teachers, all walking together, carrying flowers, straw hats, and sincere tears. In front, one of the tractors he had purchased that fateful day pulled the decorated trailer, carrying the coffin draped with a simple flag, that of the cooperative. Clara, now with grey hair, walked beside Rogerio. Both were silent, remembering how that man had changed their lives. When the procession reached the main square, where a statue of him had been erected, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the bronze straw hat sculpted on his head. It seemed like a sign, a final farewell to nature itself. At that moment, Rogerio turned to Clara and said in a choked voice, "He didn't just change the city, he changed us inside." She replied, tears streaming down her face. And this is how eternity begins, when one man's kindness becomes an example for all. The church bell rang in the distance. Children released white balloons, and the workers, in a spontaneous gesture, removed their hats and raised them to the sky. The wind blew hard, making the sound of tractor engines echo across the hills, as if the entire countryside was saying goodbye to the man who taught that the earth, like the heart, only bears good fruit when treated with respect. And so, Itaporanga learned the true meaning of greatness. Not the kind that comes from power or wealth, but the kind that springs from love and humanity. Years later, whenever someone performed an act of unexpected kindness, the city had a saying they proudly repeated, "He did as Mr. David would have done." Because, even absent, the man in the straw hat remained present in the bountiful harvests, in the laughter of children, in the sincere greetings between neighbors, and in every soul that understood that respect is the seed that once planted never ceases to bloom. His legacy wasn't just a story. It was an invisible inheritance, passed from heart to heart. And so Seu Davi became eternal, not by buying machines, but by moving consciences. Because the true engine of life isn't what pushes the field, but what drives human beings to be better with each dawn. And if this story spoke to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Also share this video with someone you love. Click now, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories that we are already preparing with great care for you. Remember, every like, every subscription, and every comment helps us reach more people and keep this mission of touching hearts through stories alive. So be part of this family that grows every day. And never forget, you too are the protagonist of your own story.